Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Speedrun Insider. My name is CJitsallGewd. I'm your host each and every week. Thank you everybody for supporting the show. We really appreciate it. A lot of downloads for that last episode. And you guys keep doing exactly what you do. I'll never ask you to do anything else. Listen to the show, tell your friends about the show, like the show. That's all I ask you guys to do. So keep doing that. We'll never have anything to worry about. I wanted to take a second to remind everybody that Speed Doxathon is coming up. It'll be August 27th, 28th, 29th, September 3rd, September 4th, September 5th, and September 6th. We are raising money for all hands and hearts. I'm not asking anyone to donate, although that'd be great if you did. Come watch the show. That's all I ask you to do is check it out if you're interested, and that helps a lot. Viewership, listenership, that goes a long way. So don't ever feel like you're not supporting the show. Just watching and listening helps us more than you know. So keep doing what you're doing. I have another guest this week. The NBA Jam style intros are still gone. I'm going to keep saying that until I bring them back because I'm punishing the audience for telling me to get rid of them. I thought they were great. I thought they were fine. Leave it to the audience, who I just praised for also being a little snotty sometimes. Yeah, you heard me. I don't always throw the baby out with the bathwater, but when I do, it's my podcast listenership. My guest for today, we have a lot of ground to cover, so I will put this off no longer. It's EnglishBen. How you doing, Ben?
I don't get an NBA Jam intro.
Boom shakalaka. That's the best you get.
That's pretty good. I'll take that.
From downtown. Speaking of things that are heating up, you just got the American Wasteland Sick world record not that long ago, like a couple hours before recording this.
Yeah, I went back to that game after not playing it for around 3 years because I was focusing on a lot of Grand Theft Auto projects, which I'm sure we'll get into. Mm-hmm. Tony Hawk has always been a kind of side project to me, just something like I would play if I wanted a break from GTA. But I'd still submit it to speedrunning marathons and whatnot. So I knew that as soon as I got it accepted into ESA, the summer event, then I knew that I kind of had to go back and reclaim the throne.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of American Wasteland. It was probably one of my favorite Tony Hawk games when I was growing up. So pretty excited to watch that. I watched part of it already. I've got 40 minutes left on the timer. So, I'm excited. I wanted to tell an anecdote about you, a personal story that I have about you before we get too deep into it, but I wanted to mention the American Wasteland thing.
Okay.
So I was doing volunteering for NASA 21. I think I might have told you this story already, but I was doing volunteering for NASA 21. I was hosting. And, not to toot my own horn, but, I'm okay on the mic. When there's a crowd, I rise to the occasion. I've done a few. This isn't my first rodeo, as we say. Some say I'm pretty good. I would never say that because I'm super critical of myself, but I'm not bad, And so they were talking about, I'm not going to say who exactly it was, but they were talking about who could we get to do hosting for this part or something? And I was sitting right there. And well, the best host that we know, we could get him to do it. And I'm straightening my bow tie and everything. And yeah, what's EnglishBen doing? I was I'm right here. I'm in the call with you. So that was the first time that I really had been exposed tangentially to you. And so I was muttering under my breath.
Is that why you brought me on here? Because you wanted to set that up and then just and then go one. This is more of a one-on-one duel, if anything. You've got the glove, you've slapped me metaphorically, and now we're going at it.
Yeah, right. I've got my dueling glove. It's gonna be pistols at high noon. No. I'm much too petty to do something like that.
You're a professional.
Yeah, there we go. That's what we'll say. No, I really wanted. So I was okay. So what does he do? Right? Let me go listen to hosting examples. Right? Times when Ben is on the mic. Let me listen to commentary. And I have to say, it wasn't the most I'm not trying to like denigrate myself here. It is Mental Health Monday. You're really good. So,
Oh, thank you.
It's like, okay, I can put my pride aside. At least they compared me. Someone one time compared me to somebody who wasn't good. And I was like, listen, bud, I get that you pay me and him the same amount of money, but you don't have to compare us like that. It's okay. Like, this dude showed up to work at one day and he like didn't have his shoes tied. And then like he didn't know how to tie them. And I'm like, this is the guy we're comparing me to. Okay, no problem. I'm just saying. I get it. You don't have to pass a fine motor skill test to work here. But if you did, I'm just saying. So I'm interested in going back a little further, peeling the onion back a little further. Where do you get started in speedrunning? And then we'll work our way towards like the tutorial stuff.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I was watching speedruns for a really long time. The earliest example I remember was around, I think it was 2009. I stumbled across like speedruns of Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and at the time it was all Speed Demos Archive, right? The real boomer stuff. Like I don't even think Speedruns Live existed back then. It was all just like very low quality. Most of them were like VHS recordings on the PlayStation 2. But this one by Cannibal K9 was a speedrun of Vice City in just short of 2 hours. And what I would do, I don't know if it was like, I was born to be a speedrunner or something, but just in order to play like my favorite games and keep them fresh, I would just play through them as quickly as I could, right? So like almost unofficial speedrunning. But I wouldn't like, time myself or anything. I would just do it to see how like good I can get at my childhood favorites. So I started doing that, and then I saw that this person on the internet was so much better than me. I'm like 12 or 13 years old at the time. So then I start looking at like, how he does these things, how like what glitches he does, like how he skips these missions, blah blah blah. And that's when I like get hooked into it because I'm like, I want to do this. I want to do that. And then back at the time, I'm sure you had this, everyone did. When you were like 13, 14, you would make like cool YouTube videos with like the cool dubstep intros and the pow pows and the whoop whoops. And I ended up making a series that was basically like a Vice City Let's Play on Camtasia on my awful laptop. But I would do these kind of like easy to teach and easy to explain strategies to complete some of the harder missions because I picked them up from this video from Cannibal K9. And I remember like they would get no views, of course, because I'm just a random guy with no subscribers making YouTube videos. And then there's a really notorious mission in Vice City. It's called Demolition Man. I don't know if you've played the game, if that name rings a bell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to those who don't know, Demolition Man is a really notorious mission that's like, it's the classic, it was so hard as a kid kind of mission. I could never beat it as a kid.
Right.
And basically you get a toy like remote control helicopter and you have to plant bombs in a building to blow it up. And it's quite difficult. The controls aren't great, especially on a PS2 controller. And I showed like a way to complete it that has like a really efficient order. So you have a lot more time on the clock. And that video got like 2,000 views, which for me, for that to just get that out of nowhere, because like the thumbnail was Demolition Man and everyone clicks Demolition Man guides because the mission is so hard. I remember going like mental. And that was when it all kind of clicked to me for it was like, this is what I want to do. I want to like teach people, I want to educate, and I want to get like massively into this. And then I discovered, Twitch Speedruns Live in 2014, I believe 2013. And then I met other GTA speedrunners, the IRC channel that we had back at the time because there was no Discord. Right. And yeah, it all just spiraled from there.
Let me ask you a quick question about IRC versus Discord. Because we do a lot of interviews for Speed Docs. And the thing that comes up the most, in fact, one community was so fractured over it that they like split up, right? As the idea of like, why did we go to Discord? IRC already did X, right?
Yeah.
Are you an IRC fanboy or is Discord just as good?
So I'm not 45 years old, so no, I'm definitely not an IRC fanboy. But let's be realistic for a second here. So, like, Discord has many issues, right? You know, we've all used it for long enough at this point. I've been using it since like late 2016. So I've had enough experience with it to know the shortcomings of Discord. But IRC is such a like higher level of entry where it's very difficult to kind of get into it compared to Discord, where you just make an account like you would on any website and just roll with it. You know, like IRC is almost like a command line, but for real time chat. And you can definitely make arguments to say that like the higher barrier of entry kind of keeps the lunatics out. You know, it maybe makes it a bit easier to communicate because you need to have that certain level of intelligence to even get in through the gates. But for the most part, I would definitely say, especially for when it comes to like real-time conversation in a community such as a speedrunning community, Discord is going to win every second of every minute of every hour.
I'm not 45.
I mean, that's a true fact. That's a true fact about EnglishBen. I am not 45.
That's right. We could cut his leg off and count the rings. He's not 45.
Exactly.
We would sew it back on, of course, because we would not cut Ben indiscriminately.
Thank you.
I play GTA, right? As every, kid in my time did, even when we weren't supposed to.
As every young strapping man who wasn't supposed to play it did, I'm sure.
Talk to me. Like, I remember how like controversial it was, and like how like it was like so risque. And now I think about GTA, and it doesn't even hit me on the radar. Do you think that that's because we're just overall more desensitized to that kind of thing now? Do you think that it is still violent? I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
So I think there's like two different spectrums to this, because I think nowadays media has gone so far that we definitely are desensitized. You know, you hear the stories about certain films that come out, and they're so shockingly, whether it be grotesque or there's like if you look at things like a Serbian film, and it's like, oh, people thought the crew actually died, and then the director gets put in prison until he reveals that actually they're still alive and he didn't release a snuff film and stuff like that. People are always trying to push the boat out for how far you can hit those benchmarks and how far you can really shock people. So I think definitely nowadays we are. I don't think Grand Theft Auto could ever be so horrific nowadays to where it would get in the same hot water or hot coffee, I suppose,
Okay.
than it did back then. But you've got to remember that, times were very different. Speaking of hot coffee, that whole situation that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, but if not, essentially, there was a planned kind of mini game in GTA San Andreas where you were supposed to have like sex with your girlfriend. And apparently the thought of sex in video games was so horrific at the time that Hillary Clinton actually passed an entire new law based on, adultery in video games. They created new legislation because of that mini game. Like, that is how hard this hit the news. Like, when do you hear nowadays that a video game commits such an atrocity that they have to create new laws to stop people from doing it? Never, right?
Yeah.
Like, they had to create adults only for Grand Theft Auto because it was a thing of its, it was one of a kind at the time. And I'll be the first to admit, don't put handcuffs on me just yet, but I played Grand Theft Auto when I was below 16, 18, 21, whatever it was in... I forget what it was in the UK, I did. Everyone did. I didn't get put into, child rehabilitation or whatever. I'm okay. I feel like I've got a fairly, got my head screwed on fairly tight. Maybe not my leg anymore since you chopped it off, but my head is there at least. So yeah, I think we all went through that. I think they pushed the boundaries a lot, but I think one of the biggest thing as to why all this hot water came about was just because at the time people didn't really understand video games as much. There's the whole thing where like a 70-year-old senator comes out and says that, this person who killed a bunch of people came along and oh, he played Grand Theft Auto 6 months prior, so it must be related. Stuff like that.
Right.
I don't think any of that's true. I think it's ignorance more than anything. But you've got to be careful when these new phenomena kind of come around. And I think that's what video games did in the early 2000s when they really hit like the big mainstream. Everyone started getting a home console. Everyone had a home computer somewhere. And yeah, like that's when it really kicked off, I think.
I remember I went to college and I don't know what they're actually called. I'm not going to say what we call them. I'll tell you after the show.
Okay.
But there's these religious folks. They're kind of like Amish, but they're not. And they like make their own clothes and they participate in society, but like they don't get in cars or anything, so they're not, like I said, they're not Amish. And I remember I went to college and in one of my film classes, there was a young lady who was in that religious group. I had gone to high school with a few of them, and like, to give you an idea of like what we're talking about, they couldn't use a computer because they would lose their soul to the machine, right? That was like the idea.
Okay.
And we had a class where we watch, and so that class, like for her to take the class, we had to watch everything on film, which I thought was really cool. That we got to like watch everything on like a film projector. However, we're watching like Clockwork Orange, and within like 10 minutes, she charged out of the room. It was like 6:00 at night, pouring rain. She had to walk like 4 miles to get home, and it was so like awful. Like if like it offended her so bad. Clockwork Orange. Have you seen a Clockwork Orange?
I have. It's a classic Stanley
It's
one.
something, right?
It is definitely something.
It's a super classic. It's Kubrick at his best, but it's not like it does. It's like compare that to Breaking Bad today. Like for at the time, yes, people were like rending their garments and like going crazy and vomiting and protesting. But now it's just like in the zeitgeist of like, okay, everything is inspired by Kubrick, so nothing can ever be. It kind of because it's inspired by, it dilutes its source material, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, because it's inspired by it, it's not, it kind of like waters it down a little bit to the point where I remember watching Breaking Bad and remembering where they dissolved the guy in acid in like a barrel or like a tote, like a plastic container. And I'm like, oh wow, that's a good way to get rid of him. And I'm like, that's efficient,
Yeah, it is.
Target's got those. Walmart.
Yeah.
So, no, I think about that when I think about GTA because I'm like, nothing is ever going to be as like crazy as that was. Even the like controversies we get are not even that. Like the biggest controversy in the most like recent years was like about the writing for Last of Us 2, which was like, like whatever, it's like blasé.
Yeah.
What about Grand Theft Auto games appeals to you as like a speedrun from a speedrun perspective? Because the older ones I find to be super frustrating to control. And the new ones I find to be just long, right? So like where do you find like the interest or the drive to keep speedrunning them?
So, because I'm known for speedrunning the older GTAs, we're talking like pre-2004 era, like we're talking 2001 to 2004. I definitely can't speak for the newer ones. I am familiar with those speedruns, but you're right, they are very long. As we've gone towards modern cinematic experiences, they become a lot harder to break. You're likely not ever going to see like a credits wrong warp in Grand Theft Auto 5 or anything like that. It's very unlikely to happen. But when it comes to what we call like the 3D trilogy era, which is Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and San Andreas, those speedruns, like, I will sing to the rooftops to anyone who will listen. Like, I have watched so many speedruns in, the almost a decade that I've been around and familiar with the concepts of speedrunning, and nothing hits me like Grand Theft Auto does. Like, as you said, like, when you talk about how difficult these games are to control, you watch people who are playing it for the first time, or maybe even people who have played it as a kid and they're familiar with it. And then you look at a world record level speedrunner, you look at the Marushkos, the Antis, the KZ Frus, like, their skills are exceptional. Like, their talent is unreal. And when you think of any of these Grand Theft Auto speedruns, and you think of the things that we have to do in order to showcase, what we can do, it's breathtaking. It really is. Like, if we can look at any of them, but let's look at Grand Theft Auto 3 for an example. Grand Theft Auto 3 has a segment towards the end of the game where you use what is called the dodo. I don't know if you're familiar with the dodo in GTA 3.
I am, yeah.
Okay, so for those who don't know, Rockstar planned to have a flyable plane in the game. Most of it is still there, okay? There's a bunch of like conspiracy theories based around like, they axed it because 9/11 and they were going to have like a 9/11 related mission. I think I bought into one of those theories one day on GTA Marathon. That was rather embarrassing. But, we live and we learn. But for whatever reason, they didn't fully implement it into the game. So there's like, it's controllable, but the way you control it is so backwards compared to what you would expect to fly a plane. So the way you control it is you have to like tap like an arrow key down to keep the nose straight. And if you let go of everything, you'll just fly upwards and then nosedive. You'll lose all of your momentum and crash. So as you can imagine, when the way you go up is by not pressing up, and the way you go down is by not pressing down, then the controls become extremely difficult when you've played any other game with any other flying machine. And you can just like say to somebody, like, if you want to know how difficult it is, because speedrunners make it look easy, right? They make everything look easy. They're gods at the games that they play, with thousands of hours of practice. Sure. And then you go into a game and you try and fly that dodo. I will be so impressed if you keep it in the air for more than 5 seconds. I will be so if you get it off the ground, I would be impressed. Like, you live to toot your horn as a speedrunner, everyone has an ego, but it really is the case. Like, the difference between someone who control that and control it in the way that we do, where you're flying at such high speeds and you're like chasing people down in this thing that you're not even supposed to be able to drive. Like, that is incredible to me. And that is what GTA speedrunning is all about. You stream these games and you have people that come in and they're like, oh, I used to love this game as a kid. And then the next message that they'll write is 15 minutes later, and they'll talk about how speechless they are because they've never seen the game played in this way. And maybe you'll even convince them to pick it up themselves and try speedrunning themselves. It doesn't matter if they fail or succeed. It doesn't matter if they take 1,000 years to get to the same level you are. The point is that you've blown someone's socks off to such a point where they want to be you. And that is what GTA speedrunning is all about. Like, it is incredible, that feeling.
A roaring rendition that makes me want to do a speed doc video about a GTA game.
I would be happy to assist.
You just sold me on it right now.
We're shaking hands right now, locking in the deal. I'm signing the contracts, dotting the I's, dotting the T's.
I love all those dots I put on my T's. I call them like flavor text in a literal sense.
Flavor text. I like it.
It's so interesting to hear you explain it. I always find, I never get people that are inspired by what I do in my streams, which is probably a me problem. But
don't sell yourself short. You're doing great, sweetie.
Oh, thanks, bud.
No worries.
Lost my train of thought.
This is why I'm the best host.
There you go.
Happen to me.
You disable me. Yeah. Thank you. Fuck, I gotta cut this part out. I gotta cut the part out where I'm being a bad one. Fuck. I always get people that come in my chat. They're like, I remember this game. And then I get the people that are like, back in the day, I used to be pretty good at this game. I could give you a run for your money. And I'm like, listen, bud, I appreciate you. You probably can't. But try. Yep. Go ahead and try. But it's harder than it looks, right? Do you ever get any of the, I used to be good at this game back in my day?
So, yes, but I would say in more of a different way. So, like, depending on the games that you play, like, another community I'm fairly interested in is Dark Souls speedrunning. Because, there's nothing more, like, Chad than completing the hardest game of all time ever made by anyone ever in about half an hour, right? Like, there's nothing more exceptionally roided in terms of your biceps pulsating than being able to say that you can do that, right? And
Right.
Dark Souls, when you watch these streams and you watch these speedrunners who are exceptionally talented, and then you get like Joe Schmo 12 in the chat, like saying like, "Oh, there's a hidden item here" and stuff like that, trying to backseat, trying to flex the knowledge. That doesn't really happen in GTA, at least in my experience. I've had maybe 5 people ever try and tell me how to play the game, you know? But there is an exceptional amount of misinformation when it comes to GTA, not necessarily just in speedrunning, but how, the games work. So GTA speedrunning is like so advanced, I suppose, for lack of a better term, is like we have a dedicated team of people who can read the decompiled scripts and can tell you exactly how everything works, So if your like game crashes and you have like a certain address, you can pinpoint exactly what line of code it crashed on and why it happened for the most part. If you have a clip of something happening, they can look into the mission script and see what was supposed to happen and what you did to make it not happen. And that's how really complicated strategies are found, So there is an awful lot of misinformation, especially on things like the GTA wiki, the fandom pages and stuff. We've considered at one point to go through and rewrite them with like, code examples as to how it all works. But this would take decades. There's so many GTA games. There's so many things to talk about. But you do get a lot of people who read the wiki that is 85% nonsense written by somebody who has no clue what they're talking about. And then somebody takes it as gospel, and then they write it in the Twitch chat, and it continues the cycle. This is how this mission works. You need to do this in order for this to happen. And it's all wrong. And you can try and convince these people that they're wrong. You can type code examples into the chat. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Some people just love to know that they're right, regardless if they're actually right. And, some people just can't be educated in that way. So GTA has that issue, but I definitely don't experience, thankfully, no, maybe next stream I'll just get bombarded, knock on wood, right? That this doesn't happen. But yeah, we don't get people telling us how to play for whatever reason. And I'm quite thankful for that because it would get extremely frustrating.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I remember not that long ago we were working on like routing a new game that had come out in a community I was a part in. I won't say the community, but we were dealing with constant misinformation all the time in regards to like wikis and articles because it was a game and like IGN has to put out their guide, right? And Polygon has to put out their guide.
Yeah.
And it was all wrong. It's like, this is not how this is checked. This is not how progression works. Like, you have to get to level like 3 of this to do this. It's like, no, you don't. You don't have to do that at all.
Yeah.
Or there's one thing, you don't have to do anything. You just have to get to the end. And it's super counterintuitive. I get why they thought that would be how progression works, because that's how you would naturally play through the game. But no, this is not how any of it tracks and any of it works. And then for like ever, and it's kind of died down now because those guides are just still wrong and haven't been updated. But, people don't come in anymore and are like, this is how it works. It's like, come on, man. Come on. Test
There is nothing that makes me more upset than when like big, media outlets, present information about us as speedrunners, whether it be like wrong information or only highlighting the bad parts. And then it continues the stigma that, speedrunners are these freaks of nature, the circus acts, whether it be like, the little gremlins in the basement, all the people who like throw controllers and headbutt their wall when they lose 2 seconds in a speedrun, which, does happen, but it happens in every community. But I feel like we have that real like stereotype that really hurts us, like when it comes to getting mainstream attention. I actually, there's like, quite an ongoing joke in speedrunning where like you've made it if you get like a Kotaku article written about you, right?
Yeah.
I had a Kotaku article written about me this year, actually. And you want to know what they did?
What'd they do?
So I had basically, don't need to go into the specifics of like the video, what happened on my stream. But basically, I got so unlucky that it was around like a 1 in, I think, 15,000 chance for this thing to happen to me this amount of times in a row. And it did, right? It was like, the most unlucky thing anyone's ever seen in GTA speedrunning history. So I make the video, it gets picked up, I tweet about it, it gets posted on like the speedrun Reddit and whatnot. So when it gets posted on the Speedrun Reddit, it gets popular, and I see it, someone links it to me, and I start answering questions. And obviously, because it's the Speedrun Reddit, it's not like, GTA Speedrun technical channel. I explain it in like the most kind of basic way possible. So like, I need this to do this glitch. This glitch happens because of this mission. Like, you don't need to go into the specifics. You don't need to go into like code offsets and all that stuff, right? Even though it is fairly technical, some of the stuff that happened. So I write these explanations in like the most, clear and concise way I can write it so anyone who could understand it, an alien who has never speedrun GTA would get it, right?
Right.
And they copy my explanations word for word and put it into the article. So they don't ask me like to clarify any of it. They just copy and paste what I wrote on Reddit, and they write it as like their analysis of what happened. And I was so upset. Not in like it's the classic the parents thing. Like, I'm not angry, Kotaku. I'm just disappointed. Like, you have so many people who work for you. My Twitter DMs are open. One of you must have common sense. Why couldn't you just ask me? I could have written something out for you. I could have helped you. I wouldn't have minded. But yeah, like, they just treat you like dirt. They don't ask you. They don't credit you. They don't do anything. And it frustrates me to no end. It really does.
I don't like it because it's not journalism, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's not journalism. You are not learning anything. You are not reporting the facts. You are just stealing, essentially. That's all it is.
All the people that are like, I'm going to get this vaccine once I do more research. I'm like, what research are you doing? What does this research entail? It's like, I'm going to read things that other people have done. I'm like, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Research, I see.
one of the biggest things is whenever you look to vote for somebody. Like, so let's say in the United Kingdom, you're voting like Labour versus Conservative, right? And these parties, they have their like manifestos that you can read, like their principles, what they're going to bring to the table, what they're going to change in terms of the country. They're publicly available. You can Google them in 3 seconds and you can read them. But people still use the TV to get their information. And then when you ask them like who, like, it's kind of a weird thing. Like, I don't really ask anyone who they're voting for because I don't think it's my business. But some people will ask me, and I don't really mind saying. Like, I don't want to get into a massive political conversation at work or something. But
sure.
If someone asks, I don't mind saying, because I don't think it's going to like escalate. And then if if they say who they're voting for in return, I'll say like, oh, so like what principles, like what pushed you towards this decision? And they'll say like, oh, I heard on the TV that Jeremy Corbyn's going to do this, right? And it's like, well, why don't you just read it from the source? Why don't you just read it from the facts? It's so easy to do, yet it's just a foreign concept to people. It always stunned me.
Yeah. So to clarify my vaccine thing, I'm always like, they're imagining themselves with like a beaker and like doing like the little eye drop in the lab, right? Like, you're not doing that. You're gonna like go read like your favorite news outlet and you're gonna do what they tell you to do.
Yeah.
God, I remember I'm a huge fan of The West Wing. I think the first 4 seasons of The West Wing are as perfect of television as has ever been produced. And there's one scene, it's in an episode called Hartfield's Landing, and the premise of the show is that the premise of the episode is, there's this group of people that vote separately from the rest of the state's primary. And this one town does all of their votes in one room at midnight, the night of the primary. And they vote differently from the rest of the state. And in the show, the idea is that they've predicted the winner of the last 60 elections, presidential elections. So they're trying to woo 3 people. Not like 3,000 people, like 3 people. And they're the Flenders. And the Flenders are giving all these reasons why they won't vote for the president, who's a Democrat. And they're like, free trade closed down the pulp mill. And he goes, the Flenders don't work at the pulp mill. He goes, and the woman he's talking to goes, no one works at the pulp mill. There's another part where He's like, they're worried that the president's going to privatize Social Security. And he goes, that's the other guy. It's like so much misinformation that like they don't even know what they actually want. So
Yeah.
take that what you will, listeners, about my opinion on whether or not you'll get the vaccine. If you just come out and tell me you're not going to get it, I at least respect that. Right? Like, I don't agree with you, but you're just like, I'm not going to get it. Like, fine, whatever. I don't need to hear your
at least
reason.
Own it.
Yeah, own it. That's all I ever ask people to do is own it. So Ian Walker, the person who wrote that article for Kotaku, just own it. Own it that you you could have done better at your job that day.
That you betrayed me.
Betrayal.
You made me cry.
I want to ask you, we're going to get to the marathon stuff in a minute, but I want to ask you, because you mentioned Dark Souls. I've watched a few Dark Souls speedruns, right? At marathons. And I find that there's a problem that they have.
Okay.
I feel like the commentary can be very hit or miss. For me, it's like, this is the hardest game that's ever been made, right? Like, for fact, it's the hardest game that's ever been made. And it has that reputation. Its reputation speaks for itself. And so I watch it and it's like, oh, here's what we're going to do, right? We're gonna stub it and then we're gonna run away. And I'm like, you're putting me to sleep. It's the it's the hardest game in the world. Tell me about it. Be energized. And why has that been my experience? Tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong, because I'm open to being wrong. Maybe the Demon Souls community, the Dark Souls community has great commentators. But why in particular is that game like it hasn't translated for me? So tell me why that might be the case.
So I think firstly, I would say you're definitely partially wrong. Like I've never watched every Dark Souls speedrun that's ever happened at a marathon.
Of course.
I would say I'm pretty well versed. I think the first one I watched was at one of the GDQs in 2013. I watched Cotty do Dark Souls. Back with like the blacksmith's giant hammer, like a super old route. It was like over an hour speedrun, which is still very impressive. But nowadays it's like 20 minutes. So it was very, very primitive at the time. And I've watched some newer stuff. I definitely think there are some people that are exceptional at what they do. But I also think that, as with every community, there are some people who do just maybe prefer to shut up and play, right? And maybe it's a mistake on their part to not get a dedicated commentator, because that's what some people prefer to do. They'll just play the game and they'll have a well-versed commentator coming along and explaining how everything happens. Sometimes people just show up and it's their first time doing anything like this, and they maybe just want to learn for themselves if it's their thing, I'm blessed in the fact that my background is in theater. I kind of had a similar thing to you, where it was something I wanted to do. That was the thing. And then I became more interested in computers instead, because acting is very hard to get anywhere. I didn't see myself becoming like the next, Will Ferrell or Jim Carrey or anything like that. So I scrapped it. But I had that experience. I was used to performing in front of crowds. And even then, before my first ever marathon run that I did, my hands were shaking. I was physically shaking from the nerves. I think I did well. But it is very difficult to commentate and explain what you're doing on a technical level while translating it in a way that everyone can understand while playing to such a high level. So some people don't really understand how hard it is until they've done it. And maybe that's what you've happened to watch. But I think there are some exceptional marathon examples out there of a Dark Souls run. If you look at people like Catalyst, like Regal, I know he did a run at GDQ that was just fantastic. And those kind of follow that same formula where it's premeditated, like almost, I don't know if it's scripted. I don't want to say scripted in case I'm wrong. But there was definitely some preparation involved to cram as much information as possible into such a short run. If you've only got 20 minutes to explain how you skip 75% of the bosses that people expect you to kill, and you teleport around the map, and also you have infinite souls and also infinite items, but you don't really have infinite items, you actually have 0 minus 1, which then, translates into minus 255, which is like an 8-bit integer or something. I don't know, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not Einstein, that can be very difficult to translate into something that everyone will understand. So there does need to be a lot of prep involved. So maybe you just saw the wrong side of the stick. Maybe you just flipped the wrong side of the coin. But there are definitely some examples of great Dark Souls commentary out there.
I will say that they were both smaller events that I was hosting during. So it may have been a combination of like fatigue from hosting, which I'm sure Ben never gets. Also,
Absolutely not. I get
absolutely not.
empowered by it. I'm the opposite. I gain energy the more tired I get. We're just two different people. I'm built different.
I love the idea that you siphon energy from other people. It's like you're like a vampire.
Don't tell anyone. Can we cut this out? Hello? Is this thing on?
Shit. So now we've beaten the hell out of this joke of you're much better than me. I want to know what you think you do that separates you from other marathon hosts, because it's not just the one person. I told that one story in the beginning. A lot of people say that you're, on their list of best marathon hosts. Some of the reasons that I've received, again, this is all anonymous. One person said you're the best because you don't give a fuck. Now, I don't know. Yeah, you're just like, you just go in there and you're just like, all right, it's what we're doing. That's my loud American version of EnglishBen.
Not a bad impression.
Yeah, there you go. If you were in Milwaukee, that's what you would sound like. And then someone else said that you just have you have the most presence. You have the best presence of other marathon hosts. So I want to hear what you think and how that kind of grew over time. How did you go from shaking holding the controller during your first marathon run to having such a commanding host presence?
So I think it's a very tricky thing to answer. In terms of I still get nervous. My theater studies tutor said, no matter how good you are, you will always still get nervous because it shows that you care, right? And that always stuck with me as because you want to be so confident that you won't get nervous, but I never did. Sometimes I would have anxiety attacks the night before I would do a big theater exam or a big performance. And, you take it in your stride and it shows that you really care about what you're doing. And I think a big part of it is that I do really, really care about this community. And especially when it comes to becoming a host and becoming the voice of a stream that needs to bring in, ultimately it's down to me to convince people to change the world for the better. Whether it be raising money for men's mental health or children around the world who are less fortunate than us. When you have that bearing and that knowledge that what you say and how you say it and putting that passion can maybe convince people to really make a difference and really make a child's life better, for example, or maybe even save a life of someone who might not be here otherwise. I think then that's when I kind of go into, I don't know how to say it, almost like a trance where I don't think about anything that I say and I just say how I feel. And I feel like that's the most important part, right? I never script anything that I say when it comes to hosting. I never write down bullet points. I never do anything like that. Same with commentary for games. I just say how I feel and I say what I think. Sometimes that lands me into trouble because we all have, sometimes a bit of a lack of filter sometimes. But I think ultimately, if I could give any advice to anyone who maybe looks up to me, I didn't know this many people saw me as exceptional or whatever, but I'm glad you do. Makes me feel very good inside, and especially that I'm better than CJ. That makes me feel good. But if I were to give any advice, it would just be that. It would just be you need to wear your heart on your sleeve, so to speak. You need to show that passion. You need to show that you are there for a reason, and not just because you maybe want to get a bit of clout by being the voice of a stream, or you want to take over and steal the spotlight. You're there because you want to be. You're there because you want to have that presence and you want to change the world in your own little way, right? And I think that's so important when it comes to stuff like this.
I remember one time, the way that I explain this to people is that everybody has something that whether it's helpful or not, some things that the thing that you're really good at or what your superpower is not entirely helpful, right? Like there's some people that can like move their fingers in really interesting ways. We're all unique.
Mhm.
We all have a thing. Even the people that don't think they have a thing have a thing. My thing is when the light is on, when I'm live, when I'm in front of people, everything about me washes away and I just become that host. And that's just who I am, right?
Yeah.
I can't be anything different when the light is on. I can't show you a different thing. I can't like bare my soul because it's all smiles and whatever. And the time that I knew this the most, I think I've told this story on the podcast, but I'll tell it to you briefly. It was the first day of launch party, which was our last event that we did, and I had gotten my second vaccine that morning. I had planned launch party like 4 months in advance, and then 2 months after that, I got my first shot, and they rescheduled me to come back on the first day of launch party, which was fine, except I was hosting all night. So I worked an 8-hour day and then hosted. Nobody knew that I got my vaccine except for like 2 or 3 people, and nobody knew. Nobody noticed. Even my own mother, who knew that I got the second vaccine, didn't realize I was like falling asleep in my chair. Because once the light is on, I just turn on and be different. When people ask me, like, how do you do it? Sometimes the answer is just, like you said, you do like you have like a purpose and you're being that person that's going to change the world and you're being a presence and you didn't say it this way, but I'll say it this way. You're trying to separate people from their money, like you want them to give to a cause, and that really you have to convince them like what they're giving to matters more than that cup of coffee, right? And anyone that's tried to get anyone that's ever tried just don't get that Starbucks tomorrow on someone who like fiends on it, that's a really hard proposition. Like it's not easy, right? They don't want to do that. People are so creatures of habits. The best advice I've ever given anybody is just be the host that you would like to listen to. Super straightforward advice, but like it's a really good approach if you don't know where to start. It's like just be the person that you would like to listen to. I really want to be like Jerry Lewis doing like a PBS telethon, right? For like St. Jude. I want to be like Robin Williams and Mork and Mindy just running around the set, They have to get 3 cameras. They have to invent a new sitcom format because they can't track Mork running around jumping up and down on the couch. So that's sort of the way that that's how I break it down.
That's a good way of looking at it.
What do you have next? What's coming up for you next? Like what's I mean, it's not going to be super topical, but any plans for the near future, near to distant?
Well, so what I've been kind of doing fairly recently is I've been on kind of like a honeymoon stage with streaming. Because I'm not sure if you know about this, but like, we talk about speedrunning world records, but I'm pretty sure I own the world records for the most rejections from Twitch partner, which is not an accolade I ever thought I'd have. But I got it on my 20th application. I was rejected 19 times. Yeah. And it became a bit of a meme since the summer of 2019. So I've been, putting my life into streaming to convince myself that I'm good enough in Twitch's eyes, and now I've finally succeeded. I've been kind of, sauntering ever since. I've had a bit of a swagger in my step. But that doesn't mean I haven't, looked towards the future and looked towards projects. Obviously, right now my main focus is practicing both American Wasteland and Grand Theft Auto 3 because I'm going to be showing them in a couple of weeks at ESA. As I said before, Grand Theft Auto 3 is an exceptionally hard speedrun, and Tony Hawk I hadn't played in 3 years, so it was very important that I don't embarrass myself. You can hold this against me, I might still embarrass myself, but I hope I don't. If you're listening to this in a month's time, if I did embarrass myself, I apologize. I tried my best. But yeah, so that's like my current short term is preparing for that and trying to make as good of a show as I can in the couple of hours that I'll have to showcase my skills. The other things that I've been working on in terms of like YouTube projects, which is like my other thing, which is where I got known for making speedrunning tutorials. There's definitely a lot of stuff I want to work on. I've actually been working on like a full video documentary sort of critique video of Resident Evil Village.
Okay.
It's planning to be about 55 to 60 pages of script. So it's going to be an exceptionally long video. We're talking like likely several hours.
Oh, wow.
Purely because I've always wanted to try something like that as something that's a bit different. I'm a big fan of Joseph Anderson. I'm not sure if anyone will know the name if you're more focused into speedrunning. But Joseph Anderson essentially releases like video commentary critiques videos, and they're very long. It takes him like almost a year to make a video. He did one on like the Witcher series, and like each part is 3 hours long, going through the entire game and talking about like every little intricacy of what he likes and doesn't like. And I think it's just exceptional. Like if I could pay him a full-time wage to spoon feed me those, like in like a podcast or audiobook format, just sing me to sleep every night, I would do that if I were a millionaire. Some people want maids, some people want cooks and chefs to spoon feed them stuff. I just want Joseph Anderson content. That's all I want spoon fed to me every night. So I wanted to try my own spin on it. Maybe I'll only do it as a one and done thing. Maybe once I finish it, I'll say, this isn't as good as Joseph Anderson. The classic comparing yourself to the best when you've never done it before. Very critical. I'm sure we have that in common. Maybe it will end up a huge flop. Maybe it'll release and be the best thing I've ever done. Who knows? But what's important is that I'm giving it a go. That's all I can really do.
Yeah, absolutely. People always ask me, if I compare myself to like Summoning Salt. And the answer is no, because the standards I hold to myself, I grew up watching film and TV and like admiring directors and knowing, DP names and cinematography names. And I'm like, I don't aspire to be, Summoning Salt. I aspire to like make things that look like, John Ford and Hitchcock and Kubrick and whatever else. I don't want to stop at, or like more documentary stuff like Attenborough and whatever. I'm just like, which is super unrealistic. It's like, oh yeah, I want to be the Scorsese of like this like thing. It's like, oh no, it's not going to happen. But you shoot for it, and that's the standards you hold for
I would
yourself.
never describe it as unrealistic. I would say it's ambitious, and you can't take that away from you, right?
As long as you have something to run towards, I feel like that's the best thing you can hope for.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second that you stop, like, I'm going to ask someone this question on a future episode, but I'm like, how do you keep speedrunning fresh when you're out of goals to go after, right? Like, you could just keep running new games. That's true, right? You could always just keep running new games. But for me, I'm like, okay, well, at some point, the well's going to dry up, at some point. And then you have to figure out something new to do. What happens when you have achieved all of the world records in every category that you run and also all the games that you run? Like, how do you keep that motivation going? As long as you have something to run towards, I feel like you keep gas in the tank. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, so I was going to quickly say, I know you didn't necessarily ask this towards me, but I can give you a quick little insight as to how I do it.
Ooh.
So the key is to not be talented enough to ever hit those goals. So if you look down my speedrun.com profile, I'm 49th place here, I'm 35th place there, and that's completely okay. I don't have fun in comparing myself. I don't want to try and beat the world record of this. Like, yeah, I have a few world records, but they're nothing exceptional. Especially when it comes to Grand Theft Auto, I'm hitting personal goals for myself. And the key is to have those expectations be so far above your mechanical skill that you will never hit them, and therefore you will never get bored. It's genius.
Yeah, no, but that's the best plan, right? Yeah.
It's worked for me so far. 4 years strong.
You have the confidence of a much more capable man.
Yes, exactly. What's important is that it doesn't matter if I can do it. It's that I can fake to myself that eventually I can do it. I can convince myself that I can do it one day.
So that's the best, right?
Yep.
It's like you've just kind of played yourself a little bit here, you know?
Mhm.
And it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. Awesome. So I want to wrap up here in a minute, but is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we do so?
No, I think we should come full circle, don't you think? I think I've mortified you enough today with my commentary and dragging you through the mud. I think I'll let off the gas for a little bit.
Oh, I appreciate that. You know, I don't know how much more of a shellacking I could withstand.
Yeah, exactly. There's only so much one man can take. You know, you've had your morning coffee, but maybe you'll need a second one if you want to last another hour.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for being on the show. It took me a minute to find your speedrun.com profile because it's just EnglishBen. So if you want to check out his speedrun.com profile, it's speedrun.com/user/EBen, BEN. On Twitch, the freshly minted verified streamer, English_Ben. You can find him on Twitter. That's twitter.com/not_EnglishBen, @not_EnglishBen. You like to keep this interesting. I like it. And
I love to mix it up. Yeah. I would actually, one of the big reasons towards me getting partner that when I got it, I was so excited to write this email to partner support, was that I wanted to get the Twitch name EBen because that's what everyone calls me, you know, EnglishBen, right? Because in the Grand Theft Auto community, there's quite a few different Bens. So we have, you know, American Bens, and then there's EBen, EnglishBen. So that was like, I never had a nickname before, even in school. So I was quite excited to kind of embrace this one. So back when Pac was still running Speedrun.com, he always reserved that name for me. And then I thought I'd be able to do the same on Twitch. But unfortunately, whoever had that name unfortunately got the account banned. So that means that it's off the table even to partners who, you know, are able to change their name. They said to me in the email, you can change it to anything, just not that. And that was really harsh to hear because I didn't want anything else. So yeah, that's the reason behind my handles being a bit whiffed, unfortunately.
Absolutely understand. As someone that has to put an underscore at the end of their name because somebody else has taken CJitsallGewd, I understand your plight. Lastly, you can look for his upcoming Joseph Anderson style content on his YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com and type in EnglishBen. Vanity URLs are hard. Not a lot of people know that. So look for EnglishBen. You will find him. I found him very easily.
So, you can use custom ones. So like if you go to youtube.com/c/EnglishBen, all one word, you can find it. But yeah, if you like actually click on my profile and then copy the URL, it'll be like some huge string of characters.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like vanity URLs hardly ever work. Like sometimes I like ours, for example, for speed docs, most of the time doesn't work, even though we have it.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for being on EBen, as I'll call you now, for being on the show. You're the only Ben I know, but I'll still call you EBen.
That's very special to me.
And we won't ban you, you know, even though you're a better host than I am. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode. We really appreciate the support. Continue to listen, download, like, share, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your cat. You know, your cat can't download, but you can download for your cat. Keep doing the things that you do so we don't have to be beholden to any algorithm. And just one last reminder, Speed Docs-a-thon is going to be at the end of the month. It's going to be August 27th through the 29th, and it is going to be September 3rd through the 6th. So it's 2 weekends, 7 days, 12 to 14-hour days. The schedule should already be out. You can go check that out. It'll be on speedrun.com /SDAT2021, and the schedule will be linked there. You can check out the schedule. I'm not asking you to donate, but please come watch the show. Help us get the thing off the ground and have a great time and help us raise money for All Hands and Hearts. Just tune in next week. We have another great episode lined up for you, and I look forward to being back with you in your minds and your hearts then. Thank you, Ben, for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Likewise. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.